Xtine, it's an honor to introduce Xtine Burrough, who is a media artist. Her work illustrates women's stories, generates digital poetry, and intervenes on social media platforms. X projects push boundaries to interweave genres such as electronic literature, installation, interactive art, participatory art, socially engaged art, collage, and alternative photographic printmaking. She engages audiences in critical participation where the sublime is poetry made tangible. Xtine has authored or edited several books, including a recent co-edited anthology, Art as Social Practice, Technologies for Change, in 2022. Xtine is a professor in the School of Arts, Humanities and Technology at UT Dallas, where she is the creative director of the Laboratory for Synthetic and Electronic Poetry, LabSynT. Thank you so much, Xtine, for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you for such a nice introduction. And I'm so honored to be here with you. Thanks for setting this up. I think what I'll do is share my screen and we can look at some images and videos and sort of get a little bit of a tour of the book. I think that maybe is the right way to approach all of this. So let's do that. I am really happy to be joining you from Dallas, Texas. And my co-editor, Judy, was going to be with me on this call, but she got stolen away a little bit today by some needs that came up where she teaches. So we'll just have to take a moment to think good thoughts about Judy right now and everything she's doing. So I'll tell you just a little bit about me, and then I'll share a little bit about Judy, and then we'll talk a little bit about the book. So my name is Eckstein. You read my intro already. The artworks that I make are participatory, mostly online, and sometimes in printed projects. I was born in Albany, New York, and I think of myself as an artist first and foremost, although I do some editing and some writing, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. There's a really unflattering picture of me. I think of myself like a trickster poet. I work at the intersection of culture jamming and digital poetry. And there I am taking a drug test at an Amazon fulfillment center in Coppell, Texas, so that I could get hired in order to make temporary installations inside their warehouses. So sometimes, taking on some trickster movements of inserting myself into the belly of the beast, so to speak, and for the greater good of creating artworks that have some social commentary. These are some of the ways that I contextualize my work. So as someone who's kind of a mid-career artist, I have the privilege of looking over, a body of work that at least has some repetitive interests. So these are the things that I feel like I do in my personal work. I came to art making as a photographer. That was my primary area of study in the 1990s. And what really made me realize or decide or stay with the idea of being an artist were the moments in the darkroom where you kind of like lose all sense of time, where you're just kind of like in the moment working on a project and you don't know whether it's day or night because you're so in it. And I like to sort of touch on that. It's a very experiential, and it's really not very theoretical. But it was that experience that kind of made me know that I was doing what I really wanted to do. I was sort of investing my time in something that felt meaningful. And so I've kind of taken that practice, which feels like a musician who finds the sound by riffing, right? It's that kind of like process-based working through materials to kind of find myself in my creative practice. And then I also have this writing practice. And initially I started writing with these foundations of digital art and design kind of textbooks, classroom textbooks. And I started doing that because I saw kind of a gap or a kind of a hole in in what was out there, and I wanted to fill it with something that seemed to align with how I wanted to teach these kind of foundations classes that I was teaching back in the early 2000s. And I also started doing that because I had taken a job, and it was tenure track, and it was not in an art school or art department, and I was fearful that I maybe would not keep my job if I didn't start writing. So to be perfectly honest, that's what started me down this kind of trajectory of writing. But I found that I enjoy the process of writing, and I find in writing that same kind of timeless sensibility. And I now have kind of fostered a commitment to writing and to editing that is almost as strong, maybe not quite as strong, but almost as strong as my commitment to art making. So the project that I worked on around 2010 or 2011 or so is called Networks. It's the book that's almost in the middle there. And I really see that book as being like the precursor to the one that we're here to talk about today, On the Far Right: Artist, Social Practice, Technologies for Change. So I'll talk about that again in just a moment. But I also want to introduce Judy. She's not able to join us today, but there is her beautiful portrait. And just to give you some of the highlights of Judy is a photojournalist. She was a photo editor. She's been the director of photography. She's been an editorial director. She's traveled the world to document people and places and events. And she came to kind of realize her practice as a visual artist after a really successful career as a photojournalist. And that's when I met Judy and found that we had some common ground. And these are some of Judy's research and work agendas. Judy's really interested in socially engaged approaches to photojournalism. She is interested in implementing sustained dialogue in education abroad programming, and she explores the notion of objectivity in visual journalism. And some of these kind of bullet points are detailed in the chapter that she wrote for the book. So, so this is the book. Here's the sort of blurb that's on the Routledge website in the back of the book. With the focus on socially engaged art practices in the 21st century, this book explores how artists use their creative practices to raise consciousness, form communities, create change, and bring forth social impact through new technologies and digital practices. And if I were to kind of give you the less practiced, more off the cuff version of that, what I would say is that I have been teaching a class called Creativity as Social Practice here at UT Dallas with graduate students who are really interested in diverse topics and practices. They come from diverse backgrounds and experiences. In one classroom, I will have MFA studio art students who do game design, and I will have master's students who are writing a thesis, and I'll have PhD students who may or may not have a creative practice. They're working in art and technology. They may be approaching that from an art historical perspective, or they may have more of an experimental studio practice. So I teach a class that has this like really diverse range of student interests. And I titled it Creativity as Social Practice because on the first time that I taught it, when it was like a special topics class, one of the students came to me and said, I'm a little worried about taking this class because I'm not an artist. Because the student didn't really identify as an artist per se. And I said, well, okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to rename the class and we'll call it Creativity as Social Practice because everybody has creativity. So that's how that class kind of came to be named. But the kind of gap that I saw in teaching that class was that we were talking about participatory practices and we were talking about social practice and social engagement and activism and all of the works that we were looking at, all of the sort of case studies and works that had been written about in other books and that are highlighted and documented were, mostly using pretty kind of analog creative techniques, which is great and fine. But I teach in this school that's like art and technology, and my students we're trying to figure out how to enter this conversation and how to have a practice that aligns with some of these goals, but that is also like deeply embedded in technoculture, like contemporary technoculture. And so that's where the sort of like kernel of the idea, I think, came for putting together a book like this that includes 25 artists who have written reflective chapters, or in Joe and Laura's case, like interviews that help to demonstrate what this could look like in the field and to sort of create a kind of parallel discussion of social practice that engages new technologies. So I said I would come back to this. So I wrote this book, Networks, back in, I think it came out in 2011. Yeah, there it is, 2011. And it was my first kind of go at putting together an edited collection. And it was somewhat similar. I mean, this book has a sort of similar style or formatting. And it was also kind of came from a similar place. I was at the time teaching a class in interactive media design, and a lot of the examples and the books and the things that students were used to looking at were like commercial websites. And, I was interested in people who were making art with, the sort of tools of the web. There was like a hot moment where that might have been called net art, and then kind of beyond that, art that was really made for the internet. And there wasn't really a book that like put all of that together in one place. And so that's what Networks attempted to do. And it was a series of small sections with 2 chapters in each and an introduction by a scholar who could sort of give a theoretical umbrella or philosophical umbrella for the works that would come. So that book came out in 2011. And then I met Judy at Vermont College of Fine Arts, where it turns out that's where we both went for graduate school. I went there and graduated in 2001. Judy graduated in 2015. And I was there in 2015 as a guest to kind of critique student works. And that's how I met Judy. She was about to graduate and I was looking at her work and I said, oh, wow, your work really resonates with me. We have all this stuff in common. And so shortly after I met Judy, my editor came back to me and said, would you be interested in writing a follow-up to Networks? And I said, maybe, but I don't think it could be exactly quite that. Things have changed quite a lot since I put that book together. And so I reached out to Judy and said, hey, I've got this idea, based on this class I'm teaching. Would you be interested in coming in as a co-editor? And that's kind of how this project started. What's great about that is Judy and I have overlapping, I think, commitments and kind of philosophical entanglements, but our practices are really different. And so we know kind of different we have sort of different contacts, or our networks are different. And so that really, I think, helped to make the book, the contributors to the book, be as diverse as they are. I always like to show some sort of inspiration anytime I'm sharing about a project, whether it's a book project or an art project, all of the above. These are some of the books, themes, ideas, artists, writers, activists who inform my work all the way around, both my artwork and my studio work, as well as my writing and in this case, editing as well. And some of these books are referenced, I think, in the introduction to the book, and if they're not directly referenced, they're certainly kind of there as inspiration, as a sort of spiritual guides to the book project. So this is kind of repeating some of what I said, but maybe putting it in context now. So in this book, we have 5 sections, and introductions by Anne Balsamo, Harold Fletcher, Natalie Lovelace, Karen Moss, and Stephanie Rothenberg, who are art historians and design, art and design kind of cultural thinkers, artists themselves, or art critics. And then there's 5 chapters in each section, so there's 25. You can call them case studies or reflections, or some of them are interviews. Chris Johnson's is like a long form portfolio. And then across all kinds of modalities. From collaborative image making to immersive experiences, telematic art, time machines, artificial intelligence, physical computing. There's some VR in there. There's all kinds of different ways of working that are included in how artists are sort of responding to this idea of social practice. Okay, so this is the hard question, the sort of critical moment, and you know, students always ask me this question, and I think it's a fair question. Social practice is one phrasing. Some people say socially engaged art, or social engagement, or artist social practice. And there's probably other ways to say this as well. It's not you under bigger umbrella, art is activism. So I'm not going to get too caught up in like that phrase exactly. But what I will say is I do like that phrase because I like the word practice in there, because this is a book about artists voicing their works, you know, giving, sort of narrating their works, talking about their practices. And you know, these are artists, some of whom have very long, you know, have spent a long time in their practices, and some are new and emerging. But I think you know, having a creative practice is a long form lifestyle. So it's an ongoing and ever evolving way of interfacing with the world. And so in my definition, or my way of thinking about art as social practice, I really focus on the practice side of that, and therefore going to summarize the sort of key tenets of social practice from the mouths of other artists and other practitioners. Now you could do this in a different way and talk more philosophically or theoretically about what art as social practice could or should or does mean. But that's not, I'm not an art historian, nor am I a critic. I am an artist. So my preference here is to kind of stay on the side of what do the artists say, and thinking about it through that lens. So here's a few. I think I just have 3 in my slides, and then the 4th would be Suzanne Lacey, who wrote the foreword to the book. But I'm not going to touch that right now. So Tania Bruguera is a Cuban artist who speaks about art utile, and she says that art utile, which is kind of another way of thinking about social engagement and artist social practice, she says how one can use all the tools of art to change reality and how to incorporate themselves as artists and civic servants into that reality. So that's one kind of working definition or thought about what does it mean to do art as social practice. Pablo Helguera has a really great book that was on one of those previous slides that I recommend, and I always read it in my classroom with my students. And there's a lot of really great quotes I could have pulled from that book. So this is like just one, right? but of all the things he highlights, the thought process as artwork, in which the materiality of the artwork is optional. And so here you may find a sort of link to ideas about conceptual art, where the process and especially the thought process is sort of given priority. Helguera also writes about the sort of like soft borders of socially engaged art, how, artists who take up these practices are often, working or collaborating with others. And sometimes it looks like art, or maybe it doesn't look like art. Maybe it looks like protest, or maybe it looks like anthropology, or maybe it looks like something else, but that the sort of focus is on the social interaction. Harold Fletcher wrote the section introduction to the second section, and in his intro, he talked about the idea of artists who work in this vein, not just thinking about, but really planning for the three audiences. And he said, you have to sort of take this into mind when you're just even planning the work. People who had something to do with the original concept, people who experienced the project directly, and then people who experienced the work in mediated form. And there's maybe even a fourth audience, which is the people who are like onlookers to the people who experience the project directly, but maybe they could be included in that notion of direct experience. Okay, so here's my kind of synthesis. A little bit, again, working definition, but thinking about art as social practice as a method for transformation and social change by way of participation and intervention, creative process over materiality, and interdisciplinary collaborations that are all kind of defining characteristics of what the process looks like. I wanted to give you like a really quick just overview of the book itself. As I had mentioned, there's 5 sections. In a sort of poetic gesture, we start from the ground with the section called Seeds and Tools. We have authors who talk about carbon sponge, like Brooke Singer talks about carbon sponge, or mushrooms, or the sort of technology of corn. I mean, it's like really all over the place, but people get into the technologies of the earth, I think, in that section. The second section is called Windows and Mirrors, and that is a place where we see a lot of interviews, like Joe and Laura have their interview in that section. And Chris Johnson's portfolio shows up there as chapter 11, which is really a wonderful piece to see as well. The third section is called Magical Machines. And I don't know who it is that's knocking on my door, but I'm hoping they will go away. And then beyond that, expansions, and then reimagination. So kind of from the ground upward, expanding outwards, and then reimagining. the world. So that is the sort of gesture towards having the book have some kind of movement, scope, and then movement. And so what I thought I would do, just maybe for the next 10 minutes or so, is just share with you some artwork, some of the chapters, some of the authors, the sort of artist authors, and then some of the works that are in. I can't share. We don't have time to do all 25 chapters, but I've just chosen one from each section, and we'll see. I might even run out of time before doing that, but we'll try to just do a few of them. So. And I wanted to share not just the artworks, but some of what the artists have written, just to give you a chance to see the writing style and the language and the sort of intimacy with which you kind of get to know the artists in a book like this. And for me, that is, I mean, I think of that as one of my kind of scholarly interventions in the field at large, which is to create these edited collections that feel kind of like they really feel more like a curated exhibit in some ways, but rather than exhibiting the artworks, it's kind of a way to archive the kinds of works that are, you know, pretty ephemeral, and you know, digital practices are hard to conserve. But writing is not hard to conserve. And so being able to collect these works of art that are sort of a timestamp for this moment in time, and in the artist's voices, for me is something that I really value. And it's not always the way that works of art are presented, and certainly in book format. It's sort of taking a little bit of a different route than the sort of usual art historic way. So this is chapter 3 by Caesar and Lois, who are Lucy H.D. Solomon and Caesar Bayou. The section is called Seeds and Tools, and their chapter is called Biodigital Pathways, Mushrooming Knowledge, Expanding Community. And I just pulled this one section called Layering Media, Species, and Communities. And I won't read all of it out loud, but I will maybe read like the first couple sentences. The knowledge referenced in our artworks is embedded in documents such as maps, books, and internet texts. And we merge these with other forms of knowledge evidenced in the growth of networked mycelia and the behavior of communities of linked organisms. These non-human systems have their own embedded logic, which is the basis for the organizing principles of their communities. And they list the artworks that they talk about in this chapter. They say these are art projects that incorporate living systems in order to radically reimagine our communities and networks. We nurture and experiment with slime mold, airborne molds, and mushroom colonies, making connections between these living systems and human networks. So I'd like to show you just a little clip. And I think, let's see if this will, we might have to listen to some advertisement. Hopefully it won't be. I would really love to show you one from every section. So let's see if I can zip along forward. Oh boy, it's going to do that though to me. There we go. From the second section, Windows, and we can talk about the artworks maybe in the Q&A. So I just would like to
give you welcome back if you're an EVA person, and hello to those who are joining us anew. just to say that this talk is being run in conjunction
I was like,
with
what is happening?
Eva.
This is what's happening. Okay, we're going to do this kind of a thing. All right. From section 2, Windows and Mirrors, this is a chapter by Chris Johnson, and it's a portfolio, kind of an expanded portfolio called Social Practice Artworks. And I would like to read a little bit of his chapter, again, just to give you a sense of his voice, how he writes for this book. I had seen from The Roof is on Fire that listening could become a powerful creative tool for healing. Listening is essentially a passive act of generosity that primarily works in only one direction. What I needed for this new project was a more actively generous and two-way process that would allow for those on both sides of the critical divide to express themselves and also learn from each other. There was a moment when I realized that I might be able to use the act of asking a question as a key tool for a new project. If people on both sides felt free to ask and answer sincere questions of each other, I might be able to create a bridge between the two people by way of questioning, a question bridge that would work to build understanding between them. I also thought that video might create a safe setting for individuals on both sides to express honest and challenging questions of each other and provide meaningful answers. I was given 8 weeks to see if this experiment in social practice would work, and it did. And it goes on. So I'd like to play for you a small part, and I won't do the question bridge video that Chris Johnson has for us here. And I'll remember to put it away at the end.
Black man,
do you want to get out of the situation that you're in?
What is the reluctance for taking responsibility for improving our communities?
Are your children better or worse off as a result of your involvement?
Why wouldn't you be happy with your son being gay?
Why are you so violent?
why do you have that take mentality?
Why are you afraid of being intelligent?
Why?
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 What I want to know is why.
I believe that we've incorporated a lot of things that are unhealthy to us.
We are supposed to be tough.
I can't let him see no type of sucker.
Along with various other stereotypes.
The level of mentorship in our community is not as strong as it possibly could be.
When I came up, crack was a quick way for a black man to make $1 million.
Sometimes I think because we think we're black, we're some other kind of human beings, but we're just like most other human beings.
Why didn't y'all leave us the blueprint?
We did leave you a blueprint.
We just didn't tell you where it was.
That's something that we dropped the ball on.
What do you fear?
That something will harm my children.
I fear success.
Am I the only one who has problem eating chicken, watermelon, and bananas in front of white people?
Hold on, bro. Y'all niggas crazy.
That word, we have to stop using it.
I think black people can say nigga anytime they want. How dare you? What right do you have to use this word?
A lot of nigga questions for the rapper.
What is common to all of us that we can say makes us who we are?
This is the easiest question in the world to answer.
The thing that we have in common is that we are male and we are black.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there, but totally encourage you to check that out. Maybe afterwards I'll put the link into the chat. For section 3, Magical Machines, I pulled Christopher Blais' chapter, Space and Time, Science Fiction as an Imaginative Catalyst for Social Change. He writes, in 2014, I installed satellites at Central Track, the University of Texas at Dallas Artist Residency in one of Dallas's art districts near Fair Park. The satellite sculptural forms were based on an array of low Earth orbit communication satellites, and they were fashioned from umbrella frames and cardboard. Other materials included industrial weather balloon mylar, silver metallic tape, and gold foil. Some of the satellites were attached to the walls of the gallery, and others were displayed on tripods, allowing viewers to interact with the works. At the same time, I was exhibiting another project, the Ark on Noah Street, just miles away from Central Track. I pointed the various satellites near Fair Park toward the Arc, which was located in Dallas's historic 10th Street district, a former freedmen's town. Being a part of both shows at the same time, I wanted to bridge the communication gap and facilitate a connection between the historic Black neighborhood and the greater Dallas art community. In recorded video interviews with Central Track residents and their historic 10th Street district neighbors, I asked the artists about how their works connected with people outside the art world and in turn, asked historic 10th Street district residents about their experiences with White Cube art spaces. And for this one, we don't have a video, but we have kind of these side-by-side images where you can see how satellites were installed in the White Cube art space. And you can imagine that not too far away was the Arc on Noah Street that was kind of occupied a great amount of space in a sort of outdoor location. There are some really nice videos on Chris Blai's website of the community coming together to build the Arc and of something that looks very festive in celebrating the kind of opening for that project. Okay, 2 more to go. I think I can fit it in. For section 4, expansions, I took a snippet from chapter 21 by Victoria Vezna and Siddharth Ramakrishnan. Their project is called the Hawk Zodiac Dinner, and the chapter is Hawk Zodiac, Spinning the Wheel of Interspecies Collaboration. They write, food, as we know, is essential for survival. It is personal, given our cultures, families, and shared histories. Food is also political, bringing up questions of access, justice, and quality. And food is technological, evolving with us and our own technologies. Entwined with food are animals, with humans constantly cultivating and curating creatures over centuries for consumption. As evidenced by the systems of both Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, specific food is essential for good health of organs and ultimately human and ecological systems. So it was somewhat inevitable that conversations around bodies, mutations, genetics, and animals would land up literally at dinner tables. How do we describe the Hawk's dinner? The Hawk's Zodiac Dinner invites the audience to come to the table as their Chinese zodiac animal and either offer food to eat associated with each animal sign, based on ingredients from both the Chinese and Ayurvedic medical systems, or be eaten and present a dish of their own animal. The sheep and the pig, which are Victoria and Siddharth, provide them with the scientific facts and inspirations from stories, myths, music, or art, and ask them to offer and share in the dinner experience while also sharing their stories, myths, or experiences with animals. And they've got a really great video that we can look at. I think I may have clicked the wrong. Let's see if I can do it like this. There we go.
The way this project started was when I was talking to Siddharth. I got curious what he would be interested to pursue as research. And without hesitation, he said the Hawk's gene. He explained to me that it's the genes shared with every single creature on the planet. But I didn't know how to start this project, because if you're talking about all animals on Earth, where do you start and how do you make the connection? I was invited to an exhibition in China, and it suddenly occurred to me we can do the Chinese zodiac.
If you look at the I Ching, there are actually correspondence to different animals of the Chinese zodiac, and also to the different amino acid sequences which are there in your proteins. So there's a lot of ancient wisdom which might also be creeping into modern Western science. It started off with all of us just sitting at the dinner table and talking about different animals, where the audience member became the expert about Chinese herbs.
Those are very good for the eat.
we have our own relationship to the animals. So we started thinking about how to integrate the zodiac and looking at different ways that you see the animal beyond what the horoscope tells you. When we did it at the Art Science Center, we suddenly realized that a lot of people coming into the room didn't know their Chinese zodiac. And it became an interesting realization that we actually are introducing Chinese culture to the West. We asked people to start drawing and writing about the food that they're ingesting and participating, but we had to rethink about how that food is served. And this is where doing a private dinner at Linda Weintraub's became really critical to us. We realized that we should just give the suggested ingredients to the people who are invited. And this turned into a performative action with every person invited became the performer, offering the food, telling us why they created that food. Doing the dinner with Linda Weintraub made me really excited about the idea of creating a cookbook that brings in not only the food that's offered, but also ideas and impressions of people who participated in the party. And that are meant there as a kind of a seed to create conversation, discussion, and raise our awareness about food, animals, environment, and our relationship to all of the above.
Okay, so I will go ahead and stop there just for the sake of time. I was going to share with you Rebecca Modrach's from the last section, but I don't want to go over time. So I'll hang out there and then we can take questions. And if you want to see Rebecca's piece, I can always hop back into that.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Xtine.
Sure.
Fantastic. Do we have any questions from the audience? You can type questions or raise your hand. We can address them that way.
Someone wants to see the last project.
I would too. I think, yeah, we have time. We'll certainly do that.
Do we have time? Okay. Okay, I can do that. You can think about questions maybe while we look at this last one here. The last one is from the last section of the book called Reimagination, and I chose Rebecca Modrach's chapter 23 called Can This Be a Community When You're Trying to Sell Me a Luxury Watch? And Rebecca Modrach and I really share some common interest in culture jamming and kind of media savvy, subversive media formats. So this project and also this chapter kind of close to my heart in some ways. Rebecca writes, drawing on the media-savvy tactics of new left provocateurs like Saul Alinsky, the semiotic guerrilla warfare of the situationists, and my own interrogation of the ways that consumer culture perpetuates racist and sexist messaging and exerts influence over the formation of our identities and values, this chapter explores my creative practice and asks, if companies attempt to build community through brand messaging and social media, can artistic interventionist practices into those communities be understood through the lens of social engagement? And so she gives us something of a case study for a long and ongoing project that she has worked on, which is called Remade. So I'll just read to you a little bit more from this. On the surface, they appear to be neighbors to my affinities. And so she's talking about this company called Best Made, which is also related to a company called Shinola, which this might be very kind of American centric, but they are companies that make these like highly designed everyday products that are weirdly celebrated in culture and museum spaces. So that's what she's talking about. On the surface, they appear to be neighbors to my affinities: art, design, economic growth in Detroit, where she lives and works, and labor. They represent white perspectives and enduring ideologies, and I say that as a white person, almost self-paradoxically. A me who lives in my house and neighborhood with my education and my markers of social and economic class would typically support these groups. That I appear to be a member of such communities may be one of the reasons that my critiques of Shinola and Best Made were met with hostility. My willingness to cast a critical eye on entrepreneurs extracting value from Detroit residents and charlatans posing as innovative designers is an affront to an etiquette passed down through parliamentary procedures found in Robert's Rules of Order, in which one member is forbidden from finding fault with the motives of another within community debate. Ridiculing the vacuity of artisanal axes and exposing the racism of Shinola's marketing, even as MoMA acquires a best-made axe for its collection, and the College of Creative Studies in Detroit proudly houses the Shinola factory within their buildings, betrays the fellowship of artists and the art community's unspoken norms of mutual affirmation and confirmation bias by one of its own. I think seeing something of this project will really kind of solidify for you all that she has done as a way of kind of spoofing on Shinola and Best Made to kind of prove her point. So this is a really fascinating side-by-side video that she created. And what she really did was she 100% created a spoof of the Best Made website, calling it Remade. And she posed as the CEO of Remade with the sort of transformed name that took the CEO's name from Best Made and sort of jumbled it a little bit. But this media piece, side-by-side media piece, really kind of tells the story. So on the left, you'll see like media footage for Best Made company, and on the right, media footage that Rebecca Modrach made for her Remade project.
This is the oldest tool, and actually the oldest art form known to mankind. This has to be embedded in our DNA. You know, it's wood and a piece of rubber put together, sitting there in this capsule of stored energy. That's what makes it very powerful. You put a plunger in someone's hand, and they feel empowered. It's a tool that, in a sense, builds America. Remade is bringing the symbol back, but we're also casting a completely new light on it. We exist to make a better plunger. I moved here 15 years ago. I didn't move here to start a plunger company, but I did move here from a farm in Canada. You know, my father was a farmer, his father was a farmer, and so here I come to New York. I lost touch with my hands on some level. As a designer, I'd spend most of my time in front of a computer. I had sort of an epiphany. I realized that I completely lost touch with my hands. And it was time to figure out a way to get back in touch with that. The tool in itself would be a symbol of this American tradition. Not only of the plumber, but also a beautiful icon of American design. This is the Remade American Master Plunger. We stripped away everything that doesn't belong, and what remains is perfect in a sense. This is a tool that will direct the force. It's like a karate blow. It'll push through big caca. It'll break up masses of toilet paper. Most plunger handles that you see these days are chunky and bigger. It's easier for a manufacturer to make. It's cheating. But I think this is elegant. You have one hand that's like moving and another hand that's firmly planted. It's not about brute strength. It's about delicacy and efficiency. We've Buster Keaton, Jim Henson and Kermit the Frog, Marvin Gaye, and John Ford. He was a man, so incredibly devoted to his craft. Also, such a pioneer in American tradition. I think John Ford would have loved the remade American Master Plunger. I think he would have used it. We have an acronym at Remade, which stands for Courage, Compassion, Grace, and Fortitude. We've worked very hard to not only design a tool, but also to craft a belief system in this object. Wood itself is something that can be shaped and reshaped by the hand over, decades of use, to the point where a handle like this is an object with real character and has lots of stories embedded into its surface. This is a tool that you will hand down to generations. That, to me, is invaluable.
Oh, it won't let me to stop sharing.
In the meantime, Eckstein, we have received a question specifically on the book. Madeline asked if the book contains links to the projects you described and to the other projects described in the book.
Yeah, we encouraged, as editors, we encouraged that running throughout each chapter, either in endnotes or in the bibliography or both. Like every link, like links to all the projects, links to supporting materials, whatever extra and additional ways for people to see these works are there. And sometimes the links are even part of like image captions that go with some of the images. So yeah, those are definitely spread throughout.
Can I point out as well, I think one of the really fascinating and interesting parts of the book is that most of the chapters include creative prompts at the end, almost like assignments. That was that was really quite fun to come up with that, but that's I mean, you could almost use it as a kind of textbook for kind of figuring this stuff out on your own. I love that bit because it expands from a sort of academic text into a practical, like, okay, try this, try this at home.
Yeah, that was really an important part. I should have included that in the presentation as well, but that is an important part that and it was fun to ask each artist or, set of authors to come up with some kind of prompt that like related to their work or their chapter. And they're all really different, which is great too. And I will be using them in my classroom next semester. Yeah. We'll have students give them a try or lead a kind of practice section with some of those. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's a really fun part.
And I have a question. That last artist from Detroit, really, really great stuff. I don't know their work beyond that. How would you classify that as social practice? It seems
she presented. We had a little event we did like this, kind of a book launch event that we did at MSU, which is where Judy is located, and Rebecca Modrach teaches at University of Michigan, which is like just not far away. And she came and said, this is she said, usually my work isn't really thought of in the realm of social practice. And so she was happy to be included. And I was happy that she was willing to be included under that kind of framework. But in my mind, culture jamming, subversive messaging is does have a social intercourse component. And I think it does get beyond critique. And in the case of this project that Rebecca Modrach shares, she ended up getting like a cease and desist letter and having to get a lawyer. And like, so there was a lot of social intervention that happened. Right. It doesn't look the way when we imagine social practice. It takes a different form. But that's what I'm not here to set boundaries, and I would rather have these practices that are kind of going in a different direction and include them as kind of part of the way of thinking about this work. And again, like I said, for me, it's all about the process. And I think her practice is so interesting and kind of interventionist in format, that it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's in conversation. Yeah.
Any other questions from folks? Somebody is typing.
Yes.
I know, I'm just gonna go and like give people lots of love.
I had a question as well, of course, because, participating in this process, one of the things that you write about is in your introduction with Judy, that is a conversation, is the importance of conversations, and it's something Susan Leuzzi also touched upon. And I was wondering if you could expand on this notion a little bit and how that is important for art as social practice from your perspective.
Yeah, and that really comes from Grant Kester's work. There's a book that I reference in my classroom and that I maybe could have possibly come up in the intro, that's titled Conversation Pieces. And it's really about this sort of way that socially engaged art can sort of serve as this like dialogical practice where it's kind of about putting people in conversation, and again, like this idea that the process is more important maybe than the material form, and that, a conversation or a dialogue, where there's some reciprocity, is, one way to sort of think about what the engagement might look like. And I think that's evident in all of those pieces that we looked at, that they're all kind of creating conversations in different ways. Question Bridge is doing this sort of conversational thing, but it's like one person at a time on a video screen, but then at the end it's a chorus and they're talking to each other. And Rebecca Modrach's piece is like really artfully creating a conversation without calling up Shinola and like having the conversation, right? But so I really appreciate all the different ways, the different sort of creative ways that artists have reimagined what a conversation could look like, or how one might engage in dialogical activity.
It's really interesting. Thank you, Xtine.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it looks like we're getting mostly praise for the book and your presentation in the chat, but no questions.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I'm curious, what kind of response have you had to the book now that it's been out a while? I mean, what are you hearing from people? Are you what these things you put them out there in the world, and you want them to reach and make things happen. What's been happening?
Well, we've been doing events like this. So we've been doing some talks and some events. We're going to be doing one just in a couple weeks at the Oakland Museum in California, where we'll take over their Friday night. They have like a Friday night kind of community night. And Judy and I will both be there. Prabha Pilar will be there she lives in San Francisco. And then Chris Johnson will be there as well, and they'll each have some kind of like art piece, art engagement, and so I think we're still kind of in the phase of like getting the word out, and doing these types of engagements or talks, or there's a roundtable at CAA coming up in February, so we're kind of in the phase, I think, of just getting the word out still. I know at one point Anna Nasher mentioned reviewing it for the ELO. I forget which but they've got like a book review something that maybe that will happen. So it would be nice to get reviews and kind of get that feedback in writing, I guess, Joe, but
yeah.
But we're not quite at that stage yet. I think it's a little early, but it does seem like people are there's interest and people are you know, purchasing it and thinking about adopting it for classes and stuff like that. So it's, I did a talk for SUNY Buffalo, and Stephanie Rothenberg, you know, was saying like, yeah, you know, I hadn't really thought about it, but you're right. Like this kind of work, we don't often think of it in the kind of digital space. And so like highlighting it and as like, how do people who use these kinds of art making tools do this is like, you know, an important conversation. So I'm hopeful. I think that, you know, under this sort of frame of art and technology and media art, that people will find their way to these great chapters that everyone wrote and prompts that they delivered.
Fantastic. Oh, I guess I'll see you at CAA. Going to be going.
Yeah, you should come. Well, you should come join the roundtable too.
Yeah, love to. Yeah,
try to figure out how to make that happen formally. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions, comments? Fantastic. Really appreciate you taking the time, and also just want to personally just say, hey, thanks for inviting us to be part of this. Oh, hold on. There's someone saying some. There's a comment here from Malcolm Dixon. Good to hear about this, Laura, and to hear Eckstein. Great to hear Grant Kester's name and work referenced here. It's a huge area of social engaged art practice. It takes on a different dynamic when a non-art community is engaged or attempted to. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And thank you. I think it's probably a good that could be a good comment to kind of take an exit on. Fantastic.
Good.
Thanks so much for taking out of your day to join us and share this fascinating text.
Thanks
And,
so much for having me. Thanks for setting this up, and thank you to all of you for
sure.
being here. I know it's like a time of year where people get real busy, so I really appreciate your support.
Oh, fantastic. And we had a link in the Eventbrite for people to get the book with a discount code. If you need that, just let us know. Yeah, get the book. It's great. Thank you so much. Laura, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Laura. So I should say have a good evening, right? It's evening now.
Good evening. It's time for
Have
a
a good
dram.
day.
Good night, everybody,
Bye.
and good
Good night.
afternoon to
Bye.
you. Bye.